Hey there, it's Melissa Brunetti, and welcome to the Mind Your Own Karma podcast.
Hey there, Karma Crew. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Mind Your Own Karma, the Adoption Chronicles. Today I have Melissa Ulven on the show today. She is an adoptee, and she's a domestic infant adoptee, adopted by her foster family when she was 1 year old. Melissa is a project coach and death planning educator based in Eugene, Oregon. When she is not busy with work, she embraces her eclectic interests, which have included, but are not limited to, longsword fencing, roller derby, and participating in dog sports with her majestic 7-year-old rough collie. In addition to her collection of hobbies, Melissa dedicates a large portion of her time to writing and helping others understand how to approach novel writing as a definable project. This is my interview with Melissa Ulven. We are welcoming Melissa to the show today. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, it's great having two Melissas on here. So let's just jump right in. And what are the circumstances of your adoption? What do you know about that?
Sure. So I was a domestic infant adoptee. I went into foster care around 6 months. And my foster parents adopted me when I was 1 year old. I grew up knowing I was adopted, and I was the only adopted child within the family. My adopted mother had 3 other biological children, 2 of whom were raised with me, but they're all older. 9 and 8 years difference was my closest siblings in the family. And my biological family, I have 3 full siblings, all of whom were kept. And I had contact with my biological great-grandmother and great-aunt occasionally growing up. So I had a tiny bit of connection with my biological family, but it wasn't until much later in life that I got in contact with my immediate family.
You said that you went into foster care at 6 months, so you were with biological family until you were 6 months?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was premature. So the majority of the time, I think I was in the hospital for quite a while. So the time that I was with my biological family and from the hospital to when I was put into foster care wasn't a ton of time. I think it was like a couple months. I'm still unclear on the timeline. I've tried to piece it together, but there's still some fuzziness around it.
Okay. So why did your adoptive parents want to adopt? Do you know why?
That's a very good question. Honestly, I can't say definitively why. My adoptive mother was also adopted, and I think that has a lot to do with it. And this is just my perception, so I can't say if this is actually the 100% truth of it, but I feel like her motivation to adopt was to do it better than how it was done with her. And they were they had another foster child that they were considering adopting as well. And that was a child with special needs. It didn't end up happening, and so they adopted me instead, I guess. So I can't say really, because it's not like they didn't have children. And my adopted father at the time, they ended up getting divorced like not too long after, so I don't really know him. And then she remarried, and so the person who I consider my adoptive father didn't officially adopt me until I was 10 years old. Um,
Okay.
but they had been married since I was two. Um, but yeah, it's very unclear as to why she wanted to adopt, but that's my take on it. Is she wanted to uh, have a chance to do things in the way that I think she would have want them to have been done with her when she was growing up, because uh, a it was not a kind environment,
Mm-hmm.
from what I understand.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, the rub of it is that she didn't fully deal with her own adoption trauma, and so she didn't really fix things, I think, how she maybe would have wanted to.
Now she also relinquished a child, correct?
Yeah, so she did have one other biological child. It was a teenage pregnancy, and she was forced to relinquish
Mm,
that child, and was never able to find her. She did try and look for her. This was in, I remember her doing this search in the 90s, and nothing really came up of it, unfortunately. And
yeah.
I would love to try to find this person, but I have absolutely no information to go off
Yeah.
of. So I think it's going to be next to impossible.
I always think that's so interesting that to have that combination of being an adoptee and then also a birth mother, having both those perspectives, because like you said, you feel like maybe she was trying to do it better than what she had, but then also maybe trying to replace that child that she gave away, just all those dynamics. So how did having both those dynamics affect your relationship with her, or did it?
Yeah, it's weird. It's really weird because growing up, there was still this sense of othering that I had to go through. In the sense of she would tell my origin story to people, essentially, just like put it all out there.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't really have much of a say as to like who got to hear the story and who didn't. And it was always in this light of, well, there was multiple things, right? Of her positioning herself as this, person saving a child,
Mm-hmm,
essentially.
mm-hmm,
And with the fact that I had a lot of health issues when I was a baby, when they thought that, well, she thought, I don't know if this was ever really conveyed in the sense that she would present it in, but I had brain hemorrhaging when I was a baby from being
mm-hmm.
premature. And she always told this is the fact that uh, the doctors told her that I was supposed to be um, mentally challenged because of this. And I was supposed to be crippled because I had lost my toes on one foot because of uh, IV cutting off the
Oh, wow.
circulation to my leg.
Oh my gosh.
So this was the story that she would tell, which none of it turned out to be true, but she would present it as this miracle, and I think a lot of that is a way to get attention. Like she was
Mm,
always trying to like find these ways to get the spotlight on her. Um, and I think that was a lot of a coping mechanism for things that she didn't really uh, try to heal from, or at
yeah.
least not try to heal from in the right way. Um, so that there's a lot there that I have been suspicious about as to like her intentions of adopting me, if she thought that I was always going to need her.
Mm,
And I think that kind of plays in with her relinquishment of her first biological child, is that, well, I if I have a child that has all these needs that I will always have to meet, they can never leave me.
yeah. Wow.
That's a very unfortunate way of coping with abandonment, I think. Um,
Yeah. I've heard other adoptees say the same thing. That's interesting that you said that. Now you said that your mom's second husband adopted you when you were 10.
yeah,
So were you brought into that decision at all? Did they just do that? How did that feel? Like,
I was brought into the decision, and I was all for it. Like he was my father, the only father that I really knew, and so I I wasn't going to object to it. I think the thing that I struggle with now is that at the time, um, I was uh, encouraged, coerced. I don't know how you want to spit it, but into changing my full name. I not my first name, but my middle and
mhm.
last name. And my middle name has changed 3 different times. It was Anne originally on my birth certificate,
That's my
and
middle name.
yeah, Melissa Ann. It has a
Yeah,
flow to it, right?
the rhyme. Yeah.
When I was adopted, she changed it to Ruth Ann, to I don't really know if this was just to appease her adoptive mother, because her adoptive mother's name is Ruth.
Oh.
She did it for some reason. But I think that it was kind of this way to
Hmm.
to gain favor or something with her adoptive mother. And then when I was adopted at 10 by my father, she she convinced me to change my middle name. I think because at that point, um, she I don't know, she was done with her adopted mother and she wanted to like get rid of that name, I guess. So I changed my middle name to his middle name, which is Dale.
Okay.
And I don't have a problem with it, but like this feeling of like always having your name in flux and not really having full agency over it.
Yeah.
Um, it's it's a challenge for me, and I'm still kind of working through.
Yeah. Are you going to change it again, possibly? You thought about it?
Yeah, possibly. Like I go by professionally go by a different last name than my legal name,
Hmm.
and something that I had kind of chosen to do uh, last year. Yeah, it was last year that I kind of went through this, and essentially claiming like I don't have a connection with my last name. It was very much my mother's connection, which that is another weird story if you want to go into that. But um, her her last name uh, through her mother's remarriage is Nelson,
Hmm.
and um, because her adopted father died when she was 2, and then her mother got remarried.
Oh, okay.
And the father that raised her, she uh, just adored, absolutely adored, and so she's very connected with that last name.
Hmm.
Um, and this is where it gets weird. So the man who she married when after I was adopted, who I consider my was her stepbrother.
Oh, wow.
They're 13 years apart, and I've always had this feeling like she married him because like it was that putting her her stepfather up on this pedestal, and it was kind of continuing that in some
Yeah.
way. And so she
Interesting.
like had that last name, right?
Yeah.
And so she had a really like strong connection with it,
Yeah.
and it's it's not a connection that I have. And so I have chosen to use a name that uh, I feel connected to, that isn't my adopted name or my biological name. It's something that's just for me.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I still struggle
Yeah.
with the idea of changing it legally. I'm not quite there yet. And maybe one day I will be, but for now I'm still kind
Yeah. So growing up, did you have siblings? Were they adopted or biological?
so two siblings that I grew up with. They're both they're both biological. Um, and so I'm the only adopted one. That was another thing that was kind of like, because I grew up knowing a little bit of this sense of othering, not only with, getting my origin story kind of like told to the masses at any given time. Um, I, I had this disconnect between my siblings, not only age, because they're so much older than me, 8 and 9 years older than me, but um, it was there was never a chance to forget that like I was different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember having this painted plaque that was hung above my bed growing up that said, "Never forget for a single minute, didn't grow under my heart, but in it."
Mm-hmm.
And I like just thinking about that just makes me so angry. Like it was like a brand, stuck
Yeah.
there. Like, don't forget that you're different,
Right.
um, which
Yeah.
is hard.
Yeah. So your siblings were older, so they were conceived by your mom's first husband. And
Yes.
did they have to change their last name as well when your mom got remarried? Did they go through that whole adoption thing?
No, they did not change their last.
Wow. So how'd that make you feel that you were the only one that had to change your last name?
No, I never really thought about it much. Like, um, I think because by that time where I actually did the official adoption with him, um, they were they were both out of the house. So it was just me. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I never really put much thought to it.
Hmm. Okay. And so looking back now at your childhood, did you see adoption playing out in your personality or how you were in life now looking back?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's layered, right?
Hmm.
I think because coming off of how I was raised, my adoptive mother, because she never really like dealt with her trauma, she had a lot of controlling and manipulative ways to go about interacting with people, especially her children.
Hmm.
Um, and so I had this sense of um, people pleasing, essentially. Like I needed to put myself last and make sure that everybody else around me was taken care of, and like their their needs are met. And I definitely like have seen that behavior follow me through, into adulthood. And it's just like just now that I'm picking that apart and seeing all the pieces that have led up until now and being like, my mind is just blown.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, oh, I did all these things. Um, and that completely ignored my own intuition to make sure everybody else is taken care of. And that's once you have that realization, it's intense. It really is intense, and it's painful. And I think the at least the spot that I feel like I'm at now is breaking that down and now trying to rebuild into a new person.
Right. So, did you search for your biological family?
Uh, in a sense, so I always had some sort of contact with my biological great aunt.
Okay.
And then in, what was this, 2006, 2000, this was 2005, 2006, somewhere around there. I had gotten a letter from her that talked about my biological brother, my closest in age, so he's 2 years younger than me. His marriage, he just got married, and I had known through conversation with her that he knew about me, that my brothers knew about me. I assumed that um, my youngest sibling, sister, also knew about me. Um, and so, because I knew that they had knowledge of my existence, I reached out to him. I This was like early days, like Facebook, right? So I found him on there and sent him a message. And so he was my first contact with my immediate biological family. And we set up a time to meet over the holidays. I was living in Alaska at the time. He was in the Midwest, but we were both coming down to Oregon to visit family because that's where everybody's from. So we met, and kind of the rest is a little bit of history. Like, it took me some time to work up the courage after that meeting to write letters to my biological mother and biological father. And then I finally met the whole family in 2008.
Were your
And
biological parents together still?
so they had divorced, but all three siblings, biological siblings, are mine, are full biological.
Oh, okay. So, how did the reunion go with your mom?
It went well. It went well. Yeah, I kind of feel like I got super lucky in this regard, in that we've all clicked really well, and there's been a lot of really good acceptance. Like, I gained this entire new family, and there hasn't ever been any uh, animosity or bad feelings. I think I still struggle with the always feeling apart, like there's still, no matter what you do, you're still an outsider,
Yeah,
because you don't have that shared history,
right,
right?
right. Yeah.
Even though, like, the uh, it's been said many times while visiting with family that, like, oh, it's like it feels like you've just always been here. It's like, well, that's a nice feeling.
But
but
I
that's nice.
haven't. Yeah. So, do you get along with your siblings? You kind of alluded that your sister might have not known about you. Did she?
So, unfortunately, communication isn't necessarily like the super strong suit of the family, and so, like, she was still in high school when I met my brother, and uh, she hadn't been told yet. So it was a bit of a shock, I imagine.
Yeah.
Um, but we have a good relationship now. Like, it's been a number of years, but um, yeah, I can imagine that would have been quite the shocker. And honestly, like, if I had known that she didn't know, I wouldn't have reached out. Like, I didn't want
Yeah.
to cause any trouble.
Right.
So I had made the assumption that,
Yeah.
which wasn't the case. But, it worked out just fine.
It's funny how you have to tiptoe around that stuff, right? I mean, we're constantly doing that on both sides and in the middle of trying to not hurt this one or, whatever. And it's like, sometimes it makes me angry. I'm like, when is it our time to live our truth and just, we didn't sign our lives away. Someone signed them away for us. And so it's like, but we're still like so worried about offending or, traumatizing somebody else.
Absolutely. I think it goes into that, at least for me, the people pleasing, like got to make sure everybody's okay, at the expense of yourself, um,
Exactly.
which that's not fair.
I know it isn't fair. So what about the paternal side? What happened with that side?
Yeah. So I met my biological brother or my biological father, in that same meeting in 2008. And everybody lives fairly near each other, and it's not too far away, kind of in the same like little groupings of cities. Um, and it went well. Like, learning about that side of the family was interesting. They're all farmers. And I was lucky enough to meet my paternal grandmother. Um, I think it was 2013. She died at 93.
Mm.
Um, but when I met her, she had lost her eyesight in her 50s, to an infection.
Oh, wow.
And so she couldn't really see me, but it was very sweet to meet her. She was very excited, and she sat me down and told me stories about, and this is one of those things that I think only adoptees can really get, or somebody that didn't grow up with their biological families. When you have something that you're just drawn to for no real specific reason. Uh, I I grew up just having this obsession about Alaska. No real reason. Like, it's not like that wasn't really introduced to me by my adoptive family. I just had this obsession about it.
Yeah.
And when I met my grandmother, she told me about, she grew up on the East Coast, and got into uh, she got her college degree and ended up doing, biological sciences, and worked for the Red Cross, and she had this plan of working her way across the country to get to Alaska, because her father worked on a gold dredge in the Yukon, and she grew up hearing
Mm.
stories about Alaska. It was just fascinating. Well, she ends up working her way from Florida all the way over to Oregon, where she ends up meeting her future husband, and then she never gets to Alaska.
Oh, wow.
And so as she's telling me the story, it's very cute. She points above her head. She's sitting in this chair, and the wall behind her, above her head, there's this this velvet painting. You know what I'm talking about? This
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
velvet paintings of a moose. And she's like, but I've got this moose. Um, so I feel like that that obsession for me was like bloodbound in some way, and I had actually went up to Alaska to go to school, and I moved up there in 2002 or 2003. And so I completed that journey for her in some way
Yeah.
without even knowing it.
Right. What did she think when you told her?
Oh, she was ecstatic. She was absolutely ecstatic. Yeah, and so I wish she could have seen it,
Yeah.
but um, hopefully, a part of her through me has been able to kind of check that one off the list.
Yeah. Did you have biological siblings on your dad's side, or just the ones that you had already
Nope,
met? No additional
just
ones.
just just the three. So yeah, we're kind of a complete set, I guess.
Yeah. So, do you use the word the fog? Were you ever in the fog? What do you think about the fog?
Yeah, it's it's a good question, because I didn't even really know about this term until, I don't know, 2021, I think, is when I really came across it. And I understand it, because growing up, I was very much an adoption advocate, like, because that was what was presented to me, right? So my adopted mother, I mentioned that, I was a foster child, but she had this huge fostering career. Like, she had somewhere along the lines of like 36 foster children
Wow.
throughout her career. And so I was raised with this notion of like, you're saving children. Like, how can you say that's bad?
The narrative, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I remember in high school, in my government class, we were talking about um, adoption certificates and adoption records being open for adoptees. And because I was still in this mindset, I I I was a dissenting voice in this classroom debate,
Oh, wow.
um, in the sense of like, well, the the biological mother like did this for a reason, like, and it should be just done. And looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, man, I definitely was eating that all up and believing it. And it is a testament to how we can learn and change our views, I think, that this is possible, because I don't believe that anymore. Like, I definitely have come out of the fog, as it were. And
Was there
uh,
something that made you come out or anything that happened that?
I think that I really started I really started examining my own self during the pandemic. I think I've always this is a little bit like uh, nature and just coping mechanism, but I like to be busy. I like to be doing a lot of things, and I fill my time up. And when the pandemic happened, I was just forced into this
Mhm.
time of stillness,
Yeah.
and it was really uncomfortable. And it forced me to like sit with myself and try to understand who I am and why I am, and understand why I react in certain ways. And there was a lot of things that were going on in my work life that brought up these really strong feelings of depression.
Mm.
And because I realize now this work life that I had was presented as a family. It was like a very small company, and it's like, oh, we're family and we do things together and all this stuff. And then these organizational things start changing, and I'm getting put into um, to roles that were not expected, and so like that brought up a lot of abandonment feelings, really, because like, oh, you're supposed to be family and we're supposed to look after each other, and then that's not actually what's happening.
Yeah.
And so I had to really sit with that and understand why I was feeling this way. And I think that's when I really started coming out of the fog and understanding, like, even though I think I was already on my way to not being an adoption advocate, but I think the family things, the understanding family and what it means to me and what my expectations are,
Mm-hmm.
really came out of that forced stillness in the pandemic. Um, because family is not a cut and dried thing
Right.
in my
Yeah.
mind.
Right. So, how did you, what was that process like finding yourself? What did you do? What worked? What didn't work?
I mean, it's it's a bit messy, I think.
Mhm.
I am not a seeker, I guess, if if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I am not one that looks into religion or, other methods or processes to find some sort of spiritual enlightenment. Um, I I go inward uh, in a lot of ways, and I think about philosophy, which I guess you could argue that is a little bit secrecy, but um, I just like really pick myself apart. I can't really explain the methodology behind that,
Mm-hmm.
but part of it I think is um, reading and listening to other people's stories and just ruminating on what resonates with me,
Mm-hmm.
and then thinking about like, well, why does that resonate, and then keeping asking myself
Yeah.
why,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then it kind of like digs down to that
Yeah.
that seed, that core.
Mm-hmm.
um and that's not fun.
No.
It's not fun,
It's
but
not
it's
fun, but
important.
it's short-term pain instead of having long-term suffering,
Yes,
if you deal
yes,
with it. Yeah, I
absolutely. that
think.
that I love that's a great way to put it. um the short-term pain versus long-term suffering, because that's going
Yeah, it's
back
like
to
a
my mother.
slow, yeah,
That's what my mother was doing. She
it's
was
a slow,
just
painful
suffering.
suffering. Yeah. But you're just so scared to ask those. I always call it the five whys, what you were just saying. At least ask five whys, because then you'll get to the root of it. But same. It's like it's not fun going through those levels of why. But but it does get to the root of it, and then it hopefully you feel better, after digging.
I
Did you
I
did you go ahead?
Oh, I think that uh the feeling better is it's coming into your own, like
Mm-hmm.
where we by digging through those layers, we are crafting our true identity. And there's so much that we have to strip away. Um, and that's kind of a scary process,
Yeah.
finding your true self.
Yeah. I always say it's kind of like, remember those Jack in the Box? There's a kid, the toy,
Yes.
and then the Jack in you're just like trying to hold the lid down because you're like, I don't know what's in this box,
I don't want to see it.
but I don't know what's going to come out. And it's scary. That's what it feels like to me.
Absolutely.
Did you ever read The Primal Wound?
I have not read The Primal Wound. It's on my stack of to be read.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm avoiding it. I just haven't gotten to it yet. um, but I just knowing the Cliff Notes version,
Yes.
I think there's a lot of um, valuable stuff there, but I can't say if I 100% am on board with everything or not until I read the book.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you definitely have to be ready to read it. And then, like you said, be at a spot where you can, take what you need and leave what you don't, kind of thing. Because there's a lot of it in there that I don't resonate with. Maybe someday I will, but right now I don't. So, but to just be at that point where you can, digest it and be like, okay, I can own that part, and, or that's not me. I read it a long time ago when I was totally in denial. And so the second time I've got it a couple of years ago again to reread it, where I'm at a spot that I could do that. But I have not gotten through the whole thing. I'm probably about halfway. Like I have to take it in like small doses.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot. But I do think it needs to be required reading for adoptive parents. Definitely. Because it was written by an adoptive parent too. So, lots of education in there she's a therapist too. So, from a lot of different angles. But I think it would be great reading for adoptive parents.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much that should be required for for adopted parents,
Yeah.
that just doesn't happen.
It's
Just the fact
crazy.
that like I never went through therapy as a child, and like I have no idea how many adoptees actually do, but man, I wish that would have been a required thing.
Yeah, even just like intakes on a doctor's, when you go to the doctor's office or whatever, nobody asks you. You might come in for depression, anxiety, a bunch of, things, PTSD, whatever, and nobody ever asks, were you ever a foster kid or adopted or any childhood trauma there? Kids come in with stomach aches and they're just like, they don't dig for that kind of stuff, which I think they should. So you are a writing coach for adoptees. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I have a program that is essentially teaching how to structure a novel and write it piece by piece. My background is in project management, so I kind of focus in that kind of lens
Mm-hmm.
in taking a giant project like writing a novel, which can be intimidating to a lot of people, but a lot of people want to do it, and breaking it down into smaller pieces so that it is more manageable.
Yeah, you
So
have to. I can't. I always tell authors, I'm like, I don't know how you guys write a whole book because I could barely write my bio for my website without like going into a tailspin. So I don't know how they do it.
there's apps, there's a process that you can use, and it is an individualistic thing
Mm-hmm.
too, that some techniques work for others, where it might not work for you. Some people are just, they have that drive to pump out a book within, 3 months. And that's
Wow.
not necessarily the pace for everybody. So that's kind of what I go about doing is helping to break it down. So it's not so scary, and you have
Yeah.
support you.
I'm at a spot where I'm really liking um, a little humor in my adoptee books.
Yes.
And I know a lot of people are like, why, don't laugh about that serious stuff. But I like the satire kind of,
Oh
making
yeah.
fun and just like laughing at some of the stuff. It's like, oh yeah, me too.
I'm all for that. And I think I think as adoptees, personally, we need to stretch a little bit and not just think of the memoir, but think of fiction and think of,
Mm,
all the different genres. Like, what does it look like to have a romance book that the main character is an adoptee? Like, how
yeah.
does that change things? Like,
Yeah.
what about, sci-fi, or, there's multiple examples of orphans in literature as plot devices, but how does that change when we have these stories written by adoptees specifically?
Yeah. That would be great. Yeah. Everybody wants to write their story, but I think, yeah, using that as a catalyst to write a fiction story,
Yeah,
that would be great.
and a lot of times, we want to write the memoir, but then when we get into the thick of it, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
You are dredging up a lot of trauma by flipping this and trying a fictional piece first. Can give you a lot of flexibility
Hmm.
and make it more accessible to you as an author, but also to readers as well, because not everybody is going to want to pick up a
Right.
memoir.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing is a lot of times the adoptees don't want to say a lot of the truths because they're afraid of hurting people.
Yep.
So there's always that too. So you're kind of expanding your business a little bit into offering death education, and you brought up some really good points that I heard about some adoptees are struggling with that I didn't even think of. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So the death education piece, it kind of, when I talk about all the things that I offer, it sounds like I am just maybe a little bit manic and all over the place. But I have a ton of interest. And this is one of them. I have always been really interested in just the end of life and the process of dying and what that means. Not necessarily in a spiritual case, but just in a human sense.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And all of the options that we have to approach that and give support, whether it be interpersonally or as a community. So the death education piece is just trying to get more of what I find interesting out to people to help them in their choices at end of life. I have been thinking a bit about kind of going back to struggling with the name, my name, and then thinking about, well, what do I put on a tombstone? Like,
Yeah.
what name goes there? I don't know. I have no idea. And I came to the decision for myself that I want to have a green burial in the place that I have chosen. They don't have headstones. You can have like a engraved rock, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
something that's like natural looking, in place of the headstone, or you have nothing. And for me, it kind of feels fitting to just be nameless in a way. And I haven't quite fully articulated my feelings around that, because on one hand, I really enjoy the idea of having, that genealogical record. Wow, that's really hard to say. But having that record of ancestors, I like that as an adoptee. Not always having that is it when you do have it available to you, it feels like such a luxury.
Mm-hmm.
I am lucky in the sense of my biological great aunt was really into genealogy, and so I've got these books of family members back into the 1400s, like
Oh, wow.
going way back, and that is nice to have. And I don't know if like my niece or nephews, or any of their, if they have children in the future, if me kind of like essentially in a way erasing myself is going to be an issue. I don't know, like there's a lot of
Yeah.
feelings around that I haven't quite pinpointed. But
Well, man, at the end of life, if there's ever a time to do whatever you want,
yes,
that would be it. I
yes.
mean, you know, to stop worrying about what everyone else is going to think at that point and do what you want.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's that free ticket, right? Like, well, I'm gonna be gone soon, so
Sorry, not sorry.
here's my
Yeah.
thoughts.
So, did you write a book? Are you
Uh,
are you writing a
I
book?
I am. I have written a book which I am now rewriting. So I did the National Novel Writing Month in 2019, which is, if you're not familiar with it, it is the month of November. You take that full month and you write 50,000 words.
Oh, wow.
Um, it is insane. It was an experience that I'm glad I did. I did not sleep much
I was
that
gonna say,
month.
did you cry?
There may have been tears. There may have been. It definitely feels like a fever dream
Yeah.
at this point. But so I completed that in 2019, and then finished the novel in early 2020. And then I took it to a developmental editor, got a bunch of feedback, and then really dug into like, oh, okay, why is this not working, and what are the things that are working? And that was kind of the start of my journey into digging into novel structure and understanding what makes a good story. And so taking those pieces that I learned from that experience, I decided to completely scrap the book and rewrite it from scratch, which was it's been a big undertaking just because, life gets in the way, and then, things kind of slow down and speed up. But it was the right decision to make, and the story is much stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been delving into writing short story fiction as well, with an adoptee focus. And that has been the thing that I've been working on recently, and putting out submissions to publications. So we'll see where that goes. But
yeah, that would be cool to have like a whole series of like one character going through, all of it. That'd be awesome. So so the book that you're writing is fiction?
Yes. Yeah. I mainly stick with speculative fiction in some form. So the book that I'm in the middle of writing is, I guess I would call it a sci-fi horror. The piece that I just recently submitted to an anthology is what's called New Weird, which is kind of a mix of horror and just various genres with a very weird spin to it. Something that kind of makes you go, oh, I have no idea what's going on there, but that's weird. If you've seen or read the book Annihilation, there's a movie that came out a couple of years ago with Natalie Portman. But there's a book series with it. That is an example of what new weird genre is.
So the writing coaching class, do you start it at one time, or can you just like come in whenever you're ready to start? Or
yeah, so I have right now I'm doing live lecturing. So I have a session going on now, but the way that it's set up is you can sign up at any time, and it'll drip feed you each lesson week by week.
Oh, okay, cool. So we'll put all the links to find you in the show notes, but do you want to tell us where people can find you?
Yeah, sure. You can find me at ulvencoaching.com. That's ULVEN. And all of my stuff is up there right now. Eventually, probably in the next year, I will be moving the death planning part of the business into a rebrand of its own. But right now, it's kind of all housed in one, so you can find a little bit of death planning and a little bit of adoptee writing and some project coaching. So cool. An eclectic mix.
Yeah. So we'll have those links in the show notes. So if anybody wants to find you. So lastly, what would you like struggling adoptees to know?
I would like them to know that they have the answers that they're looking for. Everything that you need is within yourself. It's not easy to get to all the time, but it is there. So trust yourself. Don't let others dictate what to do, where to go, who to be, who to like, what to be. It's all within you.
Right. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show today and sharing your story. I know there's a lot of people out there that'll benefit from it. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I really appreciate it.
Wow, it just blows my mind that Melissa's mother that raised her, her adoptive parent, was not only an adoptive parent, but a birth mother and an adoptee as well. The triad in one person. I just can't imagine all the things that she went through and emotions and feelings on each one of those levels, and how that must have affected her parenting style. It had to have affected her parenting style. I think that's the first time I've heard that combination of all three legs of the triad. And that would be a super interesting interview. So if there is anyone out there listening that was an adoptee, birth mother, and adoptive parent, get in touch with me. Let's get your story on the podcast. I would love, love, love to hear your perspective. And as for Melissa and a lot of adoptees that I talk to, journaling and writing a book and just getting out all your feelings and emotions on paper, even if you don't publish it, is so healing. So if you are at all interested in exploring that and learning how to write a novel, get in touch with Melissa. All her links are in the show notes. I have some awesome interviews coming up in the next couple weeks that you are not going to want to miss. So stay tuned for those. And if you're wanting to tell your story on the podcast, you can email me at mindyourownkarma@gmail.com. My website, mindyourownkarma.com. And speaking of websites, my new website for somatic mindful guided imagery is up. And that is somatichealingjourneys.com. If you are interested or curious about what SMGI is, go to that website. You can learn more about me and what SMGI can do for you. As always, take what you need and leave what you don't. And always remember to mind your own karma. I'll see you next time.